Hey guys, today I got another book haul for you. So yeah, I have had a couple of book hauls lately. Don't worry about it. We're just gonna jump right into this one without commenting on how many books I'm buying. So first up, I have a couple Fairy Loot editions. We have Blood Scion by Deborah Fillet. This is a YA fantasy with cool sprayed edges. It is signed by the author, as all Fairy Loot books are, and has artwork under the dust jacket, which is pretty fun. And this book has a very cool cover. I'm digging the vibe. I don't know if this is a series or a standalone. I don't think it says. But I know we follow a character who's like a descendant of a god, and that's a bad thing. And like she has to hide her power, and her mom goes missing trying to help her keep this secret, and she ends up joining the army, and it sounds interesting, like very high stakes, and I love a good like god descendant story. So this is a very cool edition, and I'm excited to have it. In that same box, we also got a paperback version of Emily X. Sarpan's An Arrow to the Moon. I believe this is a fantasy Romeo and Juliet retelling, and that's pretty much all I know about it. This wasn't really on my radar until I got it in the Fairy Loot box, so I don't know a whole lot about it, other than that it is Romeo and Juliet and Chinese mythology sort of woven together, which I think sounds pretty cool. It has cool sprayed edges and some customizations to the cover, which is really fun. I don't know if this is signed. It looks like it's signed. I don't think that's printed, so cool. And then we have our adult subscription book, and that is Book of Night by Holly Black. I have to be honest, this is my least favorite special edition of this book that's floating around out there. I think the Waterstones edition with the moons and the stars on the sprayed edges is really cool. The Illumicrate white edition is very interesting as well. I just think the all black is kind of boring. There's no contrast between like the ripped paper edge that we're supposed to have, or at least like in the original version, and the sprayed edges are just plain black. So I was a little disappointed about that. It does have a ribbon bookmark, which is cool, and really interesting end papers. So it's not like the worst in the world. I was just kind of disappointed because, like, especially from Fairy Loot, you just expect a little bit more, and this is their third adult box, and all three so far have had black sprayed edges. Only one of them had stencil additional details, but it was at its base black sprayed edges. So I feel like I'm being kind of nitpicky, but I really hope the next adult book from Fairy Loot is a little bit more interesting. I have been anticipating this book in particular, however, so I'm excited to read it. It's just not my favorite special edition of this book or that Fairy Loot has ever done. I just kind of expect more from them at this point, but I will still read it. Beyond that, there's really no rhyme or reason for how these are kind of all piled together beyond like paperback and hardcover, so I'm just gonna dive right in. First up, we have Neil Gaiman's Stardust. This is one of the new editions of his books. They all kind of match now, which I really like. I want to get more from him, but I wanted to start with Stardust because this is one of my like favorite movies, and I have read the book. I do remember liking the movie a bit more, so I think it'd be kind of interesting to read the book again as an adult and then analyze the movie and kind of maybe do a video comparing the two, because it's not often that I feel like I like an adaptation more than the source material, but I might also appreciate it more now as an adult than I did when I was a kid. I'm really curious to reread this one. I do like the sort of base story of this. We have a young man named Tristan Thorne who goes on this adventure to find a star to give to it's not his girlfriend, but he has feelings for her. And he finds out the star is a woman, and they have this really lovely adventure together. And I'm very excited to reread this, and I really love these new editions of Neil Gaiman's books. I want to collect more of them because I haven't really read much beyond some of his bigger titles like American Gods, so I think it would be fun to kind of go through more of his backlog. So gonna read this soon because I'm really excited about it. Then we have The Murder of Mr Wickham by Claudia Gray. This book was forced into my hands by my best friend Stephanie while we were at Barnes & Noble together. She read an arc of this and really loved it. Her and I both really like Pride and Prejudice, but she has loved it for much longer. And so this is like a murder mystery that combines a lot of Jane Austen's characters, not just the Pride and Prejudice ones, but I believe some of the other ones as well, and like their kids and stuff. Mr. Wickham turns up dead, I think, at like a dinner party. So they have to kind of discover who did it and what happened, which I think sounds like a lot of fun. And Stephanie's read a couple books like this at this point. I think Pride and Premeditation is the other really big one, but she said The Murder of Mr. Wickham was the best she's read so far. So I'm really excited to check this out, and it sounds like a really fun time. I'm kind of wanting to read at least one other Jane Austen book before I pick this one up, just so I have a little bit more context, but I do like the idea of this. The back says it's like Jane Austen meets Agatha Christie, so I think that should be a really fun time. This next book I picked up because Book Talk made me do it, and that is Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. This is really exciting because I think Tor just picked this up as well, so this is a self-published edition, but it will be being traditionally published later this year, which is awesome for the author. I believe this is the first in a series, and it just sounds so cute. It's about this orc who, like, her name is Viv, and she puts down her weapons, like, sick of fighting, and she decides to open a coffee shop. And no one's ever heard of coffee in this town that she decides to open it in. So the byline is even a novel of high fantasy and low stakes. I've heard this described as cozy fantasy, and I just love that vibe. So I definitely want to pick this up soon. I did read a couple of pages while I was sick, and it was really cozy and cute. I definitely want to continue it soon because it just seems so fun, and I've been hearing so many people talk about it lately. I want to know what all the hype is about because I just love the whole idea of this. I've also decided to go a little bit outside my comfort zone and pick up some manga. I was more into manga and anime when I was a teenager, and then I read like the big ones like Naruto and Bleach, and I was collecting some of the manga. And then when I moved out and like went to college, I gave them all to my brother, and I haven't really had the time to explore it much since, but I'm slowly dipping my toes back in. And I decided to start with Sailor Moon Volume 1. I'm a lifelong Sailor Moon fan. I've recently rewatched the anime because I remember when they dubbed it in the 90s and I hated the voices. And I watched the more recent dub a couple years ago. And I know there's a big debate between subtitles versus dubbed. For me, at least, Sailor Moon was a good, like, background show, so I needed it to be dubbed. I didn't have the time to, like, sit and watch it with my full attention, but it is just so cute and warm and fuzzy and nostalgic for me. I love this series. If you don't know somehow what this book is, or what the series is about, we follow a young girl named Usagi who finds out that she is a sailor guardian, and she has basically special powers to defeat demons and protect the earth, and it's just so cute. The anime is delightfully cheesy, and the manga has been a bit more concise. I know there's a newer anime adaptation actually, which I think is supposed to be like follow the manga a little bit more closely. But I started reading this one. I'm like, wow, this moves at like rapid fire pace because the show had, at least the version that I watched had a bit more filler to it. So it's been fun kind of seeing a more condensed version. But yeah, this has been delightful so far, and I can't wait to pick up more volumes. I also decided to pick up volumes 1 and 2 of Fruits Basket. This is Stephanie's favorite, or one of her favorite series, and I wanted to pick this one up. I did start the anime back in high school, back when like you had to watch it on YouTube in like 3 separate parts. I'm sure it's on a streaming platform now and I could check it out, but I did also want to see how the manga was in comparison, and I do remember really quite liking this. I think this has to do with like a family that's cursed and they can like turn into various like forms of the Chinese zodiac. It's just like a cute little love story too on top of that, so I'm really excited. Oh yeah, when they're embraced by the opposite sex, they turn into animals of the Chinese zodiac. So I remember really liking the show. I don't remember why I stopped. Maybe I ran out of episodes on YouTube, but I'm really excited to pick these back up. This just feels like a whole sort of nostalgic adventure for me, and I'm really looking forward to reading these. I also picked up Book Lovers by Emily Henry this month. I actually pre-ordered this one because I was so excited and wanted it like as soon as possible. I love Emily Henry. All of her romances have been 5-star reads for me. I've already read this one. It was also a 5-star read. In this one, we follow a publishing agent named Nora, and she goes on vacation with her little sister to kind of bond. While she's in this small town, she ends up running into an acquaintance of hers from the publishing world named Charlie, and they kind of got off on the wrong foot at first, but they've sort of rekindled their friendship, and they have this attraction to one another that they can't fight, and it's just so cute. This is sort of a reverse like Hallmark movie in which Nora finds herself broken up with a lot by people who eventually move to small towns to live a quieter life. And she's like very unapologetically a city girl. And she's like, that's never gonna be me. I love this book. It's so cute. I love the way Emily Henry wrote Nora. I love her relationship with Charlie. I love Nora's relationship with her sister. This was a very warm and fuzzy book, and I love it. Emily Henry is what I compare basically every other romance book to, and they're just so fun, and I loved this one. This next one was a really fun find. I found House of Salt and Sorrows by Aaron A. Craig. This is a first edition signed copy. I don't know if this was from like a pre-order campaign or what, but like it's signed, and I picked this up from my local bookstore for $7. So I thought that was an incredibly cool find. I read Small Favors by Aaron A. Craig last year and really enjoyed that. It was super creepy and just very atmospheric. I believe this is also a standalone fantasy. And this, I think, was her debut. So I'm really excited to read this, hopefully kind of more in the fall. It's a 12 Dancing Princesses retelling, and it takes place like on the seaside, but it is very creepy. So I think this will be a really cool atmospheric read for fall, and I thought it was so cool. I found a first edition signed copy of this for such a good deal. Had to snap it up. I also found a hard copy edition of Ironheart by Nina Varela. This is a sequel to Crier's War. I think it's a duology. I picked this up simply because I haven't seen this in stores at all, and this was used for $7 as well. So I thought that was a good deal. I still have to read the first one, but I couldn't pass this up. I try actively more now to not buy sequels before I've read the first book in a series. But again, I've literally never seen this in person, and it was a pretty good deal. So I'm hoping I like Crier's War. And that Crier's War, I don't know what this one is about, but the first one I know is sort of I believe it's a queer fantasy or like sci-fi, and it's like a romance between a princess and an automaton, I think. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of political things happening as well, and I just think the story sounds really cool, so I'm excited to pick that one up eventually, and then hopefully I like it so I can read this one as well. Then at the recommendation of a coworker of mine, I picked up The Henna Artist by Alka Joshi. This is a historical fiction, I believe, and our main character escapes from an arranged and abusive marriage. She's only 17 years old and makes her way alone from the 1950s rural village to the vibrant pink city of, is it Jaipur? And she becomes a henna artist there and a confidant to the most wealthy women of the upper class. I think this is the first book in a series, or maybe a duology. I'm not entirely sure, but my coworker had really good things to say about this. I think Jenny from This Story Ain't Over really likes this book as well, so curious to pick it up. I like historical fiction. I have to be in the right mood typically to read it, but I am excited for this one, so hopefully next time the mood strikes, I will pick this one up. Next up, we have a very hyped book. I'm not exactly sure the full extent of what this book is about, but I've heard literally nothing but good things. And that is Lessons in Chemistry by Bonnie Garmis. I know this has to do with a scientist who ends up with her own cooking show, and that's literally all I know. And I think that alone is a really fun premise. I don't know what it is about this book that has everybody just praising it left and right. This was a book of the month option, I believe, a month or two ago, so it was a really popular choice there. Oh, I kind of match, actually. That's cute. But I've heard about it in other spheres as well, and it just sounds really fun. I don't know if it's necessarily like a beach read. I feel like there's probably a heavier element to it. But I do like the fact that like our main character is a woman of STEM, and this is also historical fiction. It actually takes place in the 1960s. So that's cute. I like that setting a lot. Her show ends up being pretty revolutionary because she's not only teaching women how to cook, she's also daring them to change the status quo. So that sounds really fun. I can't wait to pick this one up. I love the cover. It gives me really bright summer feels, so I'm hoping to pick this one up soon. I gotta know what the hype is about. Another really fun looking summery book that I picked up recently was One Italian Summer by Rebecca Searle. I say fun, but I think this actually has like a dead mom trope, so we shall see. I think this might also have like a time travel element as well. I think, yeah, our main character's mother dies and her mom was like her best friend. So she's really reeling from this, and they were going to go to Italy together, but her mom died beforehand. So the main character, Katie, takes this trip alone. But as soon as she gets there, she begins to feel her mother's spirit. And then her mom appears for real in the flesh, healthy and suntanned and 30 years old. She doesn't understand why this is happening or how, but over the course of her time in Italy, Katie gets to know her mom in this new form, and soon she must reconcile the mother who knew everything with the young woman who does not yet have a clue. I read This Time Tomorrow by Emma Straub recently, which kind of gives me similar vibes. I don't know if this is necessarily like actually time travel or whatnot, but it sounds really cute and touching, and I really like the Italian setting, and also this book is really pretty. So I'm hoping to pick this one up in the summer as well, just because it feels fitting, and maybe cry on the beach while I read it. I don't know. We'll find out. I finally took the plunge and started to pick up some of the Penguin cloth-bound classic editions. I have admired these literally for years, and I've been wanting to start a collection of them, but I wasn't really quite sure where to start. These run for about 20 to 30 bucks a pop, depending on where you get them, so I'm going to be taking this collection very slowly, but I wanted to start it off with a book that I've been really eager to read, and that is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas. I've loved the movie version forever, and I know that's like a super condensed version. This is a chunker, as you can see, but I thought it would be a good place to start. One, I really like the look of this particular book. I think that the pattern they went with was really cool. I like all the different masks and stuff. I think that captures the spirit of the Count of Monte Cristo very well. If you don't know, this is a very kind of classic revenge tale. This man named Edmund gets framed for, I think, conspiracy, potentially murder, but I think it's like political conspiracy. He gets sent away to this super high security prison where he meets a man who basically teaches him the way of the world. Edmund himself is a commoner. I think he was a sailor, and this other man that he's imprisoned with was a gentleman, and so he educates him and helps him escape. And once he's out, Edmund decides to take his revenge against those who framed him. I've been wanting to pick up the book for a really long time, so I thought this would be a great place to start with my Penguin Classics collection. I don't know when I'm gonna get to this, but I would like to tackle it soon-ish. We shall see. But in the meantime, it's beautiful. And then, in like a weird turn of events, I found at my local bookstore a used copy of Tess of Duberville from Thomas Hardy, also the Penguin Classics cloth-bound edition. It was only $7, and like I just said, they normally run for like 20 to 30, depending on where you pick them up. I don't usually find used versions for this cheap, so when I saw it, I was like, mine. This is another one that's been on my radar for a while. I'm trying to read more classics, and I've heard really good things about this one. I don't know the extent of the story, but I know, I think Noelle Gallagher was recently talking about this book on her channel. She had to read it for her master's, and it just sounded really good. I want to try to expand my horizons with classics a little bit better. I tend to have kind of a comfort place within more of like women's literature from this time period, like Jane Austen and Charlotte Bronte, but I would like to read other things from this time. So thought this was a cool find, especially where I just decided to start picking these up. $7 ain't bad. Recently, I took a trip to Book Barn in Niantic, Connecticut, which is a huge used bookstore. It's more of like a campus, really, with several buildings. They have cats, they have goats. It's beautiful. I had so much fun there. They have 3 locations in this one town, and I picked up a couple of books while I was there. So the first of them was She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This is a very new book. It came out in the last year or so, and I got it for $5. So hardcover, can't complain. This is a historical fantasy, bit of a retelling of I believe, a real person, but this kind of spins it on its head where, like, in history, this person was a man, but in the book, I believe it's a woman who decides to take her brother's fate, basically. That seems really cool. I don't know to what extent the fantasy element extends. It seems to be a bit more like historical fiction with, like, a hint of fantasy, but I've heard good things. Pretty much everyone that I've seen that has picked this book up has loved it, so really looking forward to reading this one, and I was thrilled to find it used for such a good price. Also at Book Barn, I found a copy of The Midnight Bargain by C.L. Polk. This came with like a signed book plate, so I think it's a first edition. I'm not sure, like, I don't think this is a book box edition, but this is a book that's been on my radar for a while, namely because I think it's gorgeous, but it also has to do with magic. Like, I think our main character is a sorceress, but she has to practice magic in secret because one day she'll have to be married off, and like when a woman in the society is married, she has to wear this collar that cuts off her powers to protect her unborn children, and she's terrified of this happening. This definitely is like a little heavy sounding, but I think it sounds really interesting. I love a book where women kind of shirk the status quo and do what they want. So I'm really curious to see what this is about. I believe this is a standalone. It's a fantasy. I love those things. Was really thrilled to find a used copy that was signed for such a good deal. I also picked up The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. This is a sort of feminist retelling, I believe, of the Trojan War. Maybe not feminist, but it's from like the women's point of view. Specifically, I believe Helen and Briseis are our main voices in this book, and it's just more about like what their perspective of this war and event were, rather than the men like Achilles and Odysseus that were involved. So I've heard good things about this, and I've been kind of on a Greek mythology kick lately. I believe it was also Noelle Gallagher that was talking about this book kind of recently as well. She read it and really enjoyed it. I have a couple books in a pile that are like Greek retellings, and I'm gonna add this to it because I've heard really good things, and I've heard good things about Pat Barker in general. I haven't read anything by her yet, but I'm excited to dive in. Arguably my most exciting find from Book Barn was this hardcover edition of Alias Grace by Margaret Atwood. This is a really slept on story, especially compared to The Handmaid's Tale, but it is so good. And I'm pretty sure this is a first US edition. It says that it was printed in Canada, I believe, first. But yeah, it's kind of hard to tell. It does have the 1, and it does say first edition in the United States of America. So that's pretty cool, especially where this book is from the 90s. And this is a really interesting story. I don't even know quite where to start with this one, but there's also a TV adaptation, I believe, on Netflix. Would strongly recommend because it is so good. And again, very slept on for Margaret Atwood. And this is kind of like a supernatural, maybe crime story. So the story follows a woman named Grace who is on trial for the murder of her employer and her employer's housekeeper. The entire book, you're not sure whether or not she did it or like if she's evil or insane, basically. There's also this element of, was she possessed by like a demon or like a ghost? And it's just so fun. And she's being interviewed by a doctor, like a psychiatrist or something, who's trying to figure out what exactly happened, and she's like a super unreliable narrator, and it's a really good story, and I think it's very intriguing. And I think if you've read Margaret Atwood, specifically The Handmaid's Tale, even if you didn't like that one, definitely check this out because it's a very different story, and it's like, I love it so much. And like I said, it also has a really good Netflix adaptation, so would recommend. My boyfriend also just pointed out that under the dust jacket, we have a really beautiful painting as well of Grace, where she's behind bars here. She's not under the dust jacket. So that's a really fun detail. And yeah, that was a super cool find. I've never seen this in hardcover, and I was not expecting it to be a first edition either, but $6. And finally, I have a couple books by Emma Straub. Her newest release, This Time Tomorrow, I mentioned a bit earlier. This kind of has a time travel element in which a 40-year-old woman keeps going back to her 16th birthday, trying to change the events of her life. And this was really cool. It deals very heavily with like grief over losing a parent, which is something I relate to very strongly. It also deeply involves like a love of New York City, which was really fun to read about. So really liked this newer release by Emma Straub. So then I also decided to pick up a used copy of Modern Lovers by her. Really no rhyme or reason. This was the only used copy that my bookstore had, so that's what I picked up. I'm not quite sure if I'll like this as much as I like This Time Tomorrow, because she doesn't typically write sort of sci-fi fantasy. This is more of a contemporary story, and I think this has to do with like friends, like college friends who are getting older. They're like near 50 now, and like the drama that they're going through as well as their kids. I like a contemporary every now and then. It's good for breaking up fantasy stories and giving me a bit of a breath of fresh air in between. So would love to pick this one up soon, especially considering how much I loved This Time Tomorrow. So I'm hoping this is also really good. And that does it for this book haul. I had a lot of really cool finds in the last month or so I hope you enjoyed me sharing them with you. Please let me know down in the comments what you think I should pick up first. I'm a little overwhelmed and am willing to take direction on this. As always, feel free to check out my socials in the description box below, like this video, and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. I would really appreciate it, and have a lovely day. Bye.